95 Civic. Getting rolling here today, folks. I got a big show for you. Our friend James Santel, former U.S. attorney and, of course, host of Amicus, a law review. He's going to join us today as well. Lots of legal issues to get to, and we're going to have fun today. Jess P.S. is on the board. Thank you, Jess. We kind of have some new updates for you today. The new news of the day, if you have not yet heard, there's a new measure of time. It is no longer a Scaramucci, which is about 10 or 11 days. I guess it depends on how you calculate it. Now we have a Gates.
A Gates.
A Gates.
All right, how long's a Gates?
A Gates is 8 days.
And why's that?
Because today, Matt Gaetz has withdrawn for consideration of Attorney General.
Oh, but he was so qualified.
He was so close. So close. And apparently, above and beyond that, the timing of the withdrawal. CNN was just getting ready to drop some new news on this.
Were they?
A little bit here from the CNN. The lawyer, Joel Leopard, the attorney who represented the two witnesses in the House Ethics Committee probe of Gaetz, said his clients were relieved to have this chapter behind them after Gaetz withdrew from Attorney General consideration.
Yeah, I bet.
My clients are relieved to have this chapter behind them and eager to move forward with their lives. We're hopeful this brings final closure to all parties involved. We'll see about that. A little bit more here. The woman who says she had sex when she was a minor with then Rep. Matt Gaetz told the House Ethics Committee she had 2 sexual encounters with him at one party in 2017. Sources familiar with her testimony tells CNN. Now, the woman, who was 17 years old at the time, testified that the second sexual encounter, which was not previously reported, included another adult woman. She also testified to both sexual encounters in a civil deposition as part of a related lawsuit, sources said. So you think he didn't know she was 17 the first time he had sex with her, or the second time? Hard to say.
Hard to say.
And the other issue, of course, this fits with the bragging of Gaetz on the House floor. He would crush the ED pills and energy drinks to last all night, baby.
All night.
I can go all night. So round 2 for the 17-year-old, that doesn't make her 34.
No, they don't.
Doesn't add up.
It doesn't add.
That doesn't.
It doesn't.
It doesn't work that way?
It doesn't.
Your Honor, it doesn't work that way. So Gaetz is out.
All right.
In 8 days. And you got to, so you know the math was there. I heard like Murkowski and some of these other senators were definite no's. So the writing was on the wall. And I ponder, is this a success for the Senate, that there is a bar that they will not go below, at least in this case?
There is a bar. I mean, is it off the floor?
I mean, maybe just a little. Just a little. Philip Bump at the Washington Post. If it seems like only a week ago that President-elect Donald Trump named Gaetz as his pick to serve as Attorney General in his incoming administration, that's because it was only a week ago that Trump announced Gaetz as a pick. Well, 8 days in fairness.
Damn.
I mean, he blew the Scaramucci away, man. I mean, it wasn't even close.
Nah.
8 days in fairness. Trump made the announcement on November 13th, 8 days after the presidential election. So while Gaetz doesn't hold the record for how quickly a potential member of an incoming presidential cabinet withdrew from consideration, he's tied with George W. Bush nominee Linda Chavez. He holds the record for the fastest withdrawal in the transition period. Now, Gaetz withdrew 16 days after the election. The next closest withdrawal, Barack Obama's choice of Bill Richardson to serve as Commerce Secretary, came 61 days after the 2008 election. That's 2 weeks versus 2 months. It's a Gaetz. 8 days, man.
2 weeks versus 2 months.
I've had benders last longer than that.
Yeah, just what, last week?
After the election. I'm making it back. It's going to be great. Philip writes, since 1992, there have been 7 people identified as potential cabinet officials by President-elect who have later withdrawn. Relative to Election Day, Gaetz's withdrawal came before any of those other candidates. Let me say that again. Gates' withdrawal came before any of those other candidates have ever been identified. And they list them here in the Washington Post article. Johnson went to bat for burying, of course, the report. Let's talk about the report. I did see.
Let's talk about the report.
The Hill reported that I missed it yesterday. Wisconsin's own drunken Derek Van Orden. Well, he is down for releasing the report. So that's. I know, right?
That's interesting.
Well, it's a guy who likes to yell at 17-year-olds. He probably thought it was appropriate for people to be sleeping with 17-year-olds. He has a different kind of child abuse, yelling at the kids. Johnson went to bat for burying the report, claiming it set a bad precedent to release the results of an investigation, even if the investigation demonstrated significant wrongdoing by the elected official. But he was clearly in part responding to pressure from Trump supporters to protect Gates, the man Trump identified as the person who could bring the hated, at least among Trump supporters, Justice Department to heel. They're going to come to heel, right? Remember, he named off all the ABCs and the CIAs and the NBCs and the CBS. No, those are television stations. But all he's gonna bring them to heel. 8 days, Gates. 8 days. 8 days.
Man, I don't know if I'm relieved by this or if I'm just scared that now Trump's actually going to nominate someone who might be competent.
Yeah, I mean, is this a good or a bad thing? I mean, it's certainly a good thing in the sense that, maybe there are some Republicans in the Senate that don't want to be part of a, sex trafficking minor drug-fueled orgy party. And drug-fueled orgies, I mean, aren't those the best kind of orgies?
Sure, but with
just
adults.
Not with the minors. Exactly. I mean, you had the other adults there, Matt.
Clearly.
So what happens next? Well, that's a great question. The Hill ponders as well the 5 possibilities for Matt Gaetz. Of course, he could take another role in the Trump administration, perhaps something that doesn't require a Senate confirmation.
Yeah, it might be a little thorny still.
Well, yeah, but, it's not like they have a problem with it.
Sure.
I mean, we have the rapist in the White House, or soon to be. So,
We've got one on the Supreme Court, at least one.
And Hegseth, there's no new news out on the Foxy Pentagon pick. We'll get there as well. Another option for Gaetz, a gubernatorial run. Oh, yeah. According to The Hill, Gaetz has been among the Republicans floated to run for governor once DeSantis' terms ends in 2016. Gaetz' damaged goods and donors should line up behind someone else, said a Florida-based Republican donor. Yeah, you think so? It's time for Gaetz to practice law.
Oh, sure. So he can just get appointed to one of those lifetime positions.
There we go. Federal judgeship for him. Return to the House of Representatives. Now, Gaetz, this is interesting. I hadn't pondered this one. Gaetz resigned his seat in the current 118th Congress, but his resignation letter left some wiggle room for Gaetz to return for the 119th Congress. That starts on January 3rd of 2025, since he was reelected to the seat. Now, here's what he wrote in his letter. Quote, I do not intend to take the oath of office for the same office in the 119th Congress to pursue the position of Attorney General in the Trump administration 8 days ago. 8 days, man!
Okay, so it says do not intend.
Okay. Now that he no longer is pursuing the Attorney General position, his intentions may change. It is unclear whether Gaetz could return unilaterally, but some congressional sources believe that he can. If not, Gaetz has easily won re-election, and he could likely win a special election. Well, as mentioned, of course, you're thinking, well, he may not want to return to the House. His wife, Ginger Gaetz, reposted his statement on X about withdrawing from the Attorney General consideration with a photo of the two on the Capitol steps that was captioned, "End of an era."
Maybe she's ready to move on.
You think? Being in the House could also mean that the House Ethics Committee would again have jurisdiction over him, and nullifying thorny questions about whether it is appropriate to release a report on a former member. The panel investigated Gaetz on and off for years over allegations of sexual misconduct, illicit drug use, and other matters. Gaetz has vigorously denied the allegations, and the Department of Justice declined to charge him after investigating related matters. Some House Republicans do not want to see Gates, who threw the House into chaos when he voted to oust former Speaker Kevin McCarthy, back in the halls. No one wants him back, one House Republican told The Hill with a chuckle. I think he can get sworn in. I mean, he was elected by the district. He has every right to. So I don't think we could stop him, but he's not loved. That's for sure. Another House Republican told The Hill a collective good riddance from any right of center members, many right of center members. And of course, what else could he do? Well, here's what they all do. A media career, baby.
Yeah,
He's going to be a podcaster.
Write his book.
Media. I think he was already going to threaten to resign a while ago to join some media organization, or perhaps an appointment to the Senate. What? Shortly after Gates took his name out of the ring for Attorney General, some floated the possibility that Gates could fill Senator Marco Rubio's seat in the Senate after Rubio is confirmed as Secretary of State. Senator Gates.
Ugh.
Oh, yeah.
Do not like.
Get him out of the House and kick him up to the Senate, because that's a great idea. What else do we have here? I think that's basically the reporting. I mean, I would think media most likely.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems to be the way. Let's see. What did he say? Matt Gaetz on the X. 17 million views from 11:24 a.m. this morning. 8 days ago he was done. Did I say that? 8 days?
8 days.
How long is a Gates?
8 days.
All right, we got it. We're figuring it out. Yeah, we're learning something new every day.
Isn't that beautiful?
I had excellent meetings with senators yesterday. I appreciate their thoughtful feedback and the incredible support of so many. While the momentum was strong, it is clear that my confirmation was unfairly becoming a distraction to the critical work of the Trump-Vance transition. There is no time to waste on a needlessly protracted Washington scuffle. Thus, I'll be withdrawing my name from consideration to serve as Attorney General. Trump's DOJ must be in place and ready on day one. I remain fully committed to see that Donald J. Trump is the most successful president in history. I will forever be honored that President Trump nominated me to lead the Department of Justice, and I'm certain that he will save America. I'll just save the Viagra and the energy drinks, and maybe next time pick him a little older, Matt. Hey, we got James Santel joining us next, and you on the phones, 855-752-4842. Check, 1 2, check 1 2, check.
1 minute.
And wow, it always sounds so good when I'm here.
Yeah, that sounds great, man. Sounded good, man.
You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side, yeah.
And welcome back to the Dom Salvia Show, 855-752-4842. Jazzed as hell to be joined by my friend and yours, former U.S. Attorney and host of Amicus, a law review, Mr. James Santel. Jim, good to see you, man.
Dom, good to see you once again. It's Thursday afternoon.
I know.
Lots of things to talk about, as always, right?
Well, we have a new measurement today.
We do.
We do.
We do.
There's no longer a Scaramucci, which still exists, but it's a
Right.
little bit longer,
Right.
10 or 11 days,
Right.
depends if you're how you measure.
Right.
But now we have a Gates.
Absolutely. And again, we thought the metric system was challenging when we were in grade school, but now we've got a whole new way of measuring things. We've got a Gates, which is
8 days.
8 days. 8 days. That's it. And we'll see if we can break that in the days and weeks ahead. Frankly, nothing surprises us anymore, right?
Yeah.
And even as late as this morning, when people were asking, commenting, discussing whether or not this nomination has any legs, today in America, we say anything is possible, right? We think about the nominations, for example, I don't know, about a guy named Brett Kavanaugh, who seemed to be dead on the vine, and yet he's a Supreme Court justice today. I am old enough to remember when a fellow named Clarence Thomas was before the Senate Judiciary Committee, and again, defending himself against these allegations by Anita Hill that were very credible. And we all said, okay, he is done. I remember going out to lunch at that point with some other my colleagues from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Department of Justice. We said, okay, next nominee. And yet it went forward. And so even as late as this morning, even after his visits, that is Gates's visit with many senators last night, the thought was he will somehow go ahead. This will happen. My strong guess is that maybe some of them, maybe, just maybe, some of those Republican senators convinced him that this was not going to go well. And you never know, with all the recent additional revelations about this, that org chart that shows all the monies going back and forth between him and his co-conspirator, there's probably more out there. And maybe someone also said it's going to get worse. And that combination of things prompts this today. He withdraws Donald Trump's first loss, if you will, a significant one early on in this administration. Again, we've got a Gates. It's a new measurement.
A loss for Trump, certainly for Gates, a win for the American people, in my humble opinion.
Absolutely.
What's your assessment of the Senate? I mean, obviously, I was surprised. Given how sycophantic some of these Republicans are these days. It gives me maybe a little bit of hope that there is a little spine, perhaps. And it seemed to me like a test to some degree, a troll for the Senate to throw someone who is
plainly unqualified, right? Putting aside the human trafficking, the sex trafficking, all those
the illicit
kinds of
drug use,
exactly.
Yes,
But aside from all of that,
I mean, besides all of that,
putting that to one side,
Right.
and remember, we're talking about the chief federal law enforcement officer for the United States of America. Putting all that to one side, yes, you do look at this and you say, "Gosh, he's also just unqualified to do this. He's never really practiced law. He's not in charge of any major administrative function in his life." And so I think that
he's there to blow it up, man. You don't have to.
Right.
You don't have to be a builder to take a sledgehammer to a wall, man.
And you do see that in other areas. Have we taken a look at the Department of Education and the nominee there, who's recently?
Well, let me tell you something, brother.
That's right. And
Linda McMahon, man, she was apparently, and I saw some, and I'm not going to. I mean, it's entertainment, right? So when she's getting, I don't know,
head
suplexed
or whatever that is called,
put between her knees, and I mean, I get it. That's entertainment, but oh my goodness,
right? Again, is that what we have come to? And is that
yes? The answer is yes.
And is there no one? Whether it's in education or health and human services or national security, national intelligence, all these kinds of things, and yes, Department of Justice. There has got to be someone out there who has conservative credentials that somehow will meet those standards of the Republican senators, but who does not have this baggage and has some administrative focus on this. That gets us into, of course, the next parlor game, which is who is next,
Who's
who's
that?
coming up. And you have to believe, again, I think you made a very important point there, Dom. This was plainly intended to be something of a test case and also sends a signal that this is my retribution. That's what he promised during the course of the campaign. If there was anybody who would bring retribution to his cabinet, it was Matt Gaetz. Again, not a good nominee, but that would be his end. Yes, they're to blow it up,
Yeah.
to destroy it. The question is now, in the wake of that, a failed nomination, the failed retribution nomination, is there somebody else out there who may be more palatable somehow, you get them through, but still has that retribution mission? That's the fascinating thing that I will see. Jeffrey Clark right there, just as this Patel fellow who I think
Cash Patel.
Right, exactly, was part of the Defense Department. Others out there who might be loyalists, who may not have quite the criminal background and criminal history that allegedly, again, never charged, but
Denies it.
Right, exactly.
Did you hear the latest though? That the specific, he came out and withdrew his nomination for Attorney General shortly after getting a phone call from CNN, who said they were going to report that not only did he have sex with the 17-year-old that night, he had sex with her twice, along with another woman. They had a threesome with the 17-year-old.
Right.
That was to come out.
That was coming out,
Yeah.
exactly.
And now it's too much. Now
Right.
it's time.
Now it's time, right? And what else is out there? We know that these things drip, 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 and they get worse and worse and worse. And that's my point, that probably he saw the writing on the wall. My guess is, we don't know. My guess is Donald Trump in the White House, or the incoming White House, didn't call him up and say, hey, you got to withdraw. But maybe there were some discussions that said, internal to Gates' own circle.
The math of the
Right,
Senate. I
right,
mean, if
right,
you're not going to get them,
right.
they put their foot down, Murkowski and some others say,
Right.
no, I'm not voting for this.
Right.
I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to put my name on this. I'm not going
Right.
to put a stamp of approval on this. Absolutely not. Go pound sand.
Right.
And if you have a few of those, well, good luck. You're done. That's
Exactly,
it. End
right.
of story. And now it's called the Gates. 8
Right,
days.
exactly. And
I got a great idea for a replacement.
Good.
James Santel, former U.S.
Well,
attorney.
right.
Somebody who's
Right.
been in the courtroom, perhaps.
Sure.
Somebody who has a wide breadth of knowledge. Somebody who maybe a former Wisconsin Supreme Court justice, somebody who is a
Absolutely.
Trump supporter. How about Michael Gableman?
Right?
Yes.
Apparently, he doesn't have at least public employment right now, and we do know that he was pursuing that investigation. Used a lot of our tax dollars to pursue that to no end before breaking with ranks with the legislature there. So all sorts of options out there. You're
All
right.
sorts of options. Join us, 855-752-4842. We'll get into Michael Gableman coming up next.
The other side. Break on through, break on just like I need you. Hold me, love me, hold me, love me. I ain't got nothing but love, babe. 8 days a week.
And welcome back to the Dom Salvia Show, 855-752-4842. Gates days a week. There is a new measurement. It is a Gates. It is 8 days. Gates has withdrawn. Thank you for the suggestion, PJ. Got to play some Beatles 8 days a week. You know, I mean, it just goes with it.
It's too good. It's too easy almost, isn't it, Dom?
We started talking about the former disgraced Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice Michael Gableman.
Yes.
The Office of, Lawyer Regulation,
Right.
the
Those are
OLR.
right. Yep, exactly. All lawyers in the state of Wisconsin who are licensed here, we have to report every couple of years on these continuing legal education we've taken, all those kinds of things. And these are the folks who, if we do bad things, if lawyers do bad things.
Lawyers do bad things?
Sometimes it happens, Dom. I know that comes as a shock to you and just both. Every so often, lawyers run afoul of basic ethics rules, and they are set forth. The Supreme Court has got all kinds of rules and regulations about how you deal with courts, how you deal with clients, how you deal with money, the kinds of things you can and cannot do while you're doing, say, investigations. All kinds of things are out there. And if you run afoul of them, after an investigation, the Office of Lawyer Regulation will file a complaint. And we've got 10 count them, 10.
10? That seems high,
That
Jim.
seems a bit high,
Is
right?
there a number that generally, is it a couple? I mean, how?
Usually it is maybe a couple or so, maybe even one or two. You can actually read about many of these things in the back of the Wisconsin Bar Bulletin, sometimes naming attorneys, sometimes not. Usually it's things like commingling funds with other things should not be there, misrepresenting what you're doing, not being in communication with the client, those kinds of things. And usually it's pretty egregious if it gets to that point.
The OLR regulates customer service?
They do, believe it or not. and they will respond. And they will, again, not only do these investigations, but issue these kinds of charges. And that's where Michael Gableman, former Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice, and is now on the receiving end of, again, across the board. And it brings back memories of all of these things during this investigation.
I know.
right?
Again, this is years ago, but it seems not that long ago. Okay, there's 10 counts. And I believe it was Harry Redmond does a great breakdown at the Wisconsin Examiner. Let's just go through some of these. According to Redmond, the first 2 counts against Gableman involve statements and actions he took after filing subpoenas against the mayors and city clerks in the cities of Green Bay and Madison. Now, the complaint alleges that Gableman mischaracterized discussions he had with the lawyers for both cities, communicated with Green Bay's city attorneys when the city had obtained outside counsel in the matter, lied to Green Bay city officials about the work of his investigation, and mischaracterized those actions when he filed a petition with Waukesha County Circuit Court attempting to have both the mayors arrested for not complying with his subpoenas, which he apparently was misrepresenting.
Right. Where do you start with that? How many things?
Jim, is that bad?
It is bad
Okay,
with a capital B, a capital A, and a capital D after that. And even if you want to turn it into an adverb, it's badly, right? Right. Where do you start with that? There's so many things, and they basically all boil down to abuse of the process given to you, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to be a lawyer to understand this. Don't be on the board of the Office of Lawyer Regulations. You're given this authority, right? And to investigate this, rightly or wrongly. I think an awful lot of us would say wrongly.
Yes, correct.
There was no there to begin with, and we spent $2.8 million of our taxpayer money to do this. But given this assignment, and what you do with it is you misrepresent what you're doing. It's abusive process, right? In these various subpoenas you're issuing, you are arguably engaging in contacts with people who are represented. Everything is wrong about this, and it's just one. That's just one little pocket here.
Mischaracterizing the actions when you're filing a petition with the Waukesha County Circuit Court. I mean, the guy was on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. You know you're not supposed to mischaracterize your filings with the court, right?
Absolutely. In writing and orally, I just came, as you and just know, I just came from an appearance in the Wisconsin Circuit Court in Milwaukee County. Notes plenty, and a client next to me, but very, very clear on what I can and cannot represent to the court. I say something to the judge I was appearing in front of. I write something to her. I file that, and I am responsible for it. And we know, of course, in a larger context, there are all kinds of lawyers like Rudy Giuliani and John Eastman who got in trouble for just that sort of thing. You can't do that. And again, you made the point very clear here. You're a former Wisconsin Supreme Court justice. You're a lawyer. Everybody knows that. You don't lie to a court. You can say to them, members of the judiciary, Judge, I don't know. Judge, I can find out. Judge, I've got a different view. Give me some time to investigate. Let me be more precise on that, and I'll get back to you. But you don't lie. You don't lie. And that's what basically this is about. And then you've got the abusive portion of it, too, where people are brought along, whether they're mayors or others, you're brought along for the ride, and you're quite literally victimized by this conduct.
Also, the third count alleges that Gableman made false statements in his testimony to the Assembly Committee on Campaign and Elections when he accused officials at the Wisconsin Elections Commission, as well as the mayors of Green Bay and Madison, he doesn't like those folks, of, quote, hiring high-priced lawyers to conduct an organized cover-up.
Right. Again, appearing, this case, in front of a legislative panel. Are lawyers still under their oath of obligation to be truthful when you appear in public? Yes, I suppose when you're talking in the media and interview, you can say, I don't want to say incendiary things, but things that are partisan in nature and that may be a little bit controversial. You're appearing now in front of a legislative group for what purpose? To try to influence their actions? Right. Those are official capacity things. This is also the reason why Rudy Giuliani got in so much trouble, right? In Georgia, other places. He's appearing in front of them saying, I don't have a lot of evidence here, but lots of things to suggest that the 2020 election was stolen. He's doing the same thing. Gableman doing the same thing.
Absolutely.
Right?
And that's, I think because it's so much, it was years ago now, right? This is a while back now. Right. And I think it kind of dulls it. But when you talk about a former Wisconsin Supreme Court justice going in front of a legislative committee and accusing the WEC and these mayors of an organized cover-up,
right.
I mean, damn. Dude, I mean, if that were to be real, I would be upset. I would be mad.
Absolutely. And again, in a better, more perfect world state system where you didn't have that, if you had somebody legitimately sitting in front of a legislative group, whether it's in Washington or Madison, and says, identify your person. I have evidence to suggest that this person is engaging in criminal conduct. The Attorney General of the state of Wisconsin, the DAs, law enforcement should be all over there talking to him right afterwards saying, oh my goodness, what are you talking about? Tell us more about that, because you have just, admittedly, in a non-charging forum, you've made criminal allegations against people. Tell us what you know about this.
Exactly.
Right? We're going to call you to account for that. That's why this is, again, it's reckless, but that's at the lowest level. This is also intentional. And we think about what is the purpose of a legislative body? Number one, to pass legislation, to pass laws and make us safe and secure. And number two, to do oversight and to figure out what's going on in our state. You're corrupting that process. You are corrupting that process purposefully, intentionally.
How could that not be criminal, though?
Right.
You know what I mean? I mean, is there? Well, is it libel? I mean, is it slander? Is there anywhere? Because these are the mayors of Green Bay and Madison having to go through this, get a subpoena from this hack former Wisconsin justice to say, come down to the strip mall. Right. We want to do a behind closed doors interview with you, and then go out publicly and say that these folks, along with the WEC, are engaging in a cover up.
It is stunning beyond belief. And again, not to make reference to Rudy Giuliani, but that is again, he is facing criminal charges for doing just Giuliani, just this kind of thing. An awful lot of people, I think, would look at this and again say, yes, it is historic. Oh, yes, that's right. I remember now that happened. This also, unfortunately, suffers, my first reaction when I was seeing all this, it suffers a little bit from the Donald Trump syndrome, which is there is so much. Yeah. There is so much going on here. And, oh, yes, I remember that. And then there was this outrage. And there was this shocking thing.
Kind of block it out of our minds because it was such BS when we were getting fed it, man.
Right. And it's overwhelming, right? Yeah. And again, if you have one instance of a foot fault that you can focus on, you can say, okay, we're going to go after that person for making that horrific misstep here, and perhaps appropriately so. When you've got so much of this, the question is, it's Donald Trump once again. Where do you start, and where do you sift through all of this? Good for the Office of Lawyer Regulation to be taking this on. That is not a criminal body, and no one is going to jail as a result of this. But sanctions, you bet. Everything from fines, everything from suspensions to terminations to rescissions of your license. All kinds of things they can do.
We start at the beginning, Jim.
Right,
we did counts 1 through 3.
Right.
The fourth count, 4 through 7 now. These counts involve, against Gableman, involve actions and statements he made during open records litigation involving his investigation by the public interest organization American Oversight. Now, those counts allege that Gableman's statement while on the witness stand, he knows something about the witness stand being a former Wisconsin Supreme Court justice. While on the witness stand in open court during recess into the news media after hearing about his investigation's failure to provide records, constituted demeaning statements about a judge and opposing counsel, and displayed a quote, lack of competence. Lack of competence.
Gosh.
In following the state's open records and records retention laws by destroying records and failing to comply with American Oversight's records requests, counts 4 through 7. I mean, when the Office of Legal Regulation says that the former Wisconsin Supreme Court justice lacks competence.
Competence, right?
Did he have it when he was on the court, or is that something that he never had?
Is that new? Is that something that Robin Voss
I'm just asking
identified?
questions, Jim.
Right? When he was interviewing from the job and talked to him about basic competence here. Again, there's so many things to unpack there. If the suggestion there, again, I think it is, that we're destroying, that's obstruction of justice, right?
Seemingly.
Right? And that's one of many other things. We've also got, again, these basic issues, as you say, about competence, but you're saying things in trial in these proceedings. This is in front of Judge Frank Remington, right? We recall well the back and forth between Remington and Gableman at the time. They were sparring. Again, I know I bring this always back to the federal system. Remember that last trial witness that Donald Trump called in the hush money case?
Yeah.
Same kind of thing, right? That doesn't go well when you're taking on the judge, and that's probably the least of Gableman's problems here. We've got that. We've got representations both on the record and off the record about the quality of opposing counsel. What is that about, Justice Gableman, right? Well, we know what it's about. It's inappropriate, and it's in violation of the ethics rules.
Making some crude remarks
right?
about the opposing counsel and the judge going in their chambers and yada, yada. I mean, like that kind. I mean, real juvenile stuff.
It is sophomoric, absolutely. And that's the reason why anybody who practices in court, he was in, the Supreme Court of the state of Wisconsin. Or admittedly, it's not a trial court, but still, you've got that decorum. You call upon people, as we said before, to be honest and forthright, to say things that are legitimate, and courts rely upon those things. Yep. You took the oath of not just office before as a Supreme Court justice, but you took an oath as someone who's testifying there in a witness stand. That means something. Our entire system of justice, let's think about this. We always talk about it. It's dependent. I know you're going to smile and roll your eyes, my friend. It is dependent upon people taking the stand and living up to that oath. If that oath means nothing, then our whole system crumbles, right? And I know people do commit perjury, yes, and lie around the edges and lie in the middle of their testimony. But once again, this is a former Wisconsin Supreme Court justice, knows better. And does the OLR look at that and also say, would you know better? You bet they do. Every lawyer knows that. But this is a fellow who's got a specially heightened awareness of this, should have that. This is again, reckless beyond belief, and so much more.
James Santel, former U.S. attorney, host of Amicus, a law review right here on Civic Media. You can check him out on Saturdays, 9 to 11 a.m. Jim, when we come back, I want to wrap up the final remaining complaints against Gableman. We got 8, 9, and 10 to get to. Fines. I'd love to see some fines. Yes, the numbers. Yeah. Gableman was paid just over $117,000 during his investigation, Jim. I mean, would it be appropriate for them to say, hey, you got to pay that back? Mm-hmm.
Sure.
I mean, something along those lines?
All kinds of things. You could, again, you always want to make a fine commensurate with what has happened here, right? And how appropriate that would be to have some balance or some symmetry between what you have done, the offense against the state of Wisconsin, against the people here. Could very easily be the number they select.
Give us our money back. Well, we're never going to get the $2.344 million spent on the investigation. Maybe we can claw a little bit back from him. Folks, this is the Dom Salvia Show. That is James Santel. Jess P.S. is on the board, and you're on the lines. 855-752-4842.
8 days a week. 8 days a week.
The Dom Salvia Show. James Santel, former U.S. Attorney, host of Amicus, a law review on Saturdays. Joining me at the table today. You can be here as well, 855-752-4842. We are reviewing the 10 complaints filed by the Wisconsin of Lawyer Regulation, the OLR, against former Supreme Court Justice Michael Gableman. And we're on what, number 8? I think 8 is the number of the day. I mean, that's a scare. It's not a scare emoji, pardon.
Shorter.
It's a Gates.
It's a Gates.
It's a gate. Number 8. Gableman used his contract with the Assembly and Voss to pursue his own interests, including by stating multiple times he had to pressure Voss into continuing the investigation that dragged on for months. As mentioned, Gableman was paid over $117,000 during the investigation, and the Assembly paid $2.3 million plus for the investigation, including $1.8 million for hiring outside counsel in multiple instances of litigation initiated during the review. And I'm wondering, Jim, how much of that, a big chunk of it, I would imagine, was to fight the open records lawsuit against him by American Oversight.
Absolutely, right? One thing leads to the next.
Lawyers getting lawyers,
right,
man.
Lawyers getting lawyers, and huge amounts of money being paid to lawyers to prosecute, to defend against this. And that, frankly, the defense portion of this is especially dramatic, right? We sometimes said, the investigation is the punishment. We focus on that in some other settings as well. When you do this kind of thing and you are going after a something that we know is not at all supported, in the end, let's not forget, what did Michael Gableman say? Nothing to see here. In fact, there was no fraud in this election,
he didn't
right?
come to any conclusion, but he did still come up and say, "Hey, yeah, you guys should undo the election or redo the election." I mean, he made some asinine overturn the election. You can't do that, man.
Right, absolutely. And so that's really the point in the end, that you are doing this. Again, you're commissioned to focus on a specific goal. And everything you're doing is not only incurring huge amounts of legal bills, but this particular allegation having to do with kind of self-dealing. You're effectively going to your boss and saying, I need more time. Yeah. Why? Because he knows that as long as I do that, this will be extended, and my own salary continues over a period of time. That is, again, I hesitate to say that that's the worst thing on the table, because it's all bad. It's all very, very bad. But talk about self-dealing, self-interest. Are we surprised in the end that this comes to the OLR, and they have no problem in articulating all of these problems? They're all related.
Other people's money, man.
Yep.
OPM. The 9th count in the complaint alleges that by supporting a failed effort to recall Voss and making various public statements at rallies and in the media about his discussions with Voss, Gableman violated his duty of confidentiality with his client, that being the Assembly.
Right.
I mean, that's like seemingly the weakest one, but okay. I mean, it's obvious.
Right.
I mean, hey, and when you take into account that he also pressured, he's trying to keep Voss, hey, keep this going, changing the scope a little bit here.
Right. I'm working hard on this.
Yeah.
I'm discovering things.
Oh, yeah, by the way, then what? All of a sudden he decides to cancel it, calls your bluff, stops paying, says no. Now you're going to say, hey, we need to recall that guy.
Right.
I mean, what? That's like was it blackmail? Was it pressure? What's that all about?
It's once again, it's all bad. It's all bad. That's my simple word of the day here. And again, it may strike an awful lot of people as being the least significant among this group. But again, you've got this obligation of allegiance to one client, right? Yeah. And you can't be out there at the same time dealing, whether it's clandestinely or overtly, with another client whose interests are opposed to yours, right? That, again, basic law school 101 stuff. And again, you don't even have to be a lawyer to understand that. You cannot have split loyalties. That's what this is about. Plainly, he did. And the other part of this is, I think, about this particular charge. The record on this is pretty explicit, right? We've got things in the public domain, certainly a lot of things in the public and the private domain as well. But he's out there talking about these things, right? And so this is not a matter of having to delve deeply into history here.
Pull the tape, man.
You can pull the tape right now. You can pull it up online.
And the final count, James Santel alleges that Gableman lied in an affidavit to the OLR submitted during its investigation into his conduct. Gableman stated in the affidavit that at no time during his investigation was he engaged in the practice of law. However, the complaint includes excerpts from a number of the agreements he signed with the Assembly that serve as contracts for legal services, lists the instances during the investigation in which he gave legal advice to the Assembly, and at the times he made court filings as an attorney during the investigation. The complaint states that he made, quote, multiple demonstrably false statements in the affidavit in which he was attempting to show he had not violated the state code of conduct, itself a violation of the code.
Let's get back to the competence issue, right? So you're putting together an affidavit, and that's what OLR is asking you to do. So tell us about, they'll give you all these allegations. Tell us what you did and did not do. All right. Completely fine for you to say, I did none of this. Probably at the start, maybe at the finish. You also have to look at pages 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 inside your own affidavit that refute and suggest the things that you say at pages 1 and 10 are completely wrong. And this, of course, this is the allegation. This is obstructing the very investigation of your bad investigation, right? How many layers of incompetence and wildly unlawyerly conduct can you engage in?
Wow. James Santel, going to stick around for another hour. Also, check his show out on Saturdays, 9 to 11 a.m. here on the Civic Media Radio Network, Amicus, a law review. Jim, my assessment after reviewing these 10 complaints is that he is not qualified, and therefore he should be Donald Trump's next pick to lead the Department of Justice.
You need to be in touch with the transition group and let them know there's a candidate here in Wisconsin.
He's ready for the Trump team. Folks, this is the Dom Salvia Show. Come back with us, 855-752-4842.
Broadcasting across the state of Wisconsin on the Civic Media Radio Network and around the world on the Civic Media app. This is the Dom Salvia Show. And now, here's your host, Dom Salvia.
And welcome to the Dom Salvia Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can be a part on the lines or on the text, on the socials as well. 855-752-4842. Jazzed as hell, our friend James Santel, former U.S. Attorney, host of Amicus the Law Review, right here on the Civic Media Radio Network on Saturdays, 9 to 11. Call a little bit of your show. Last week, Jim, always a pleasure to have you, man. Thanks for sticking around.
Glad to be here once again. As always.
As always. Now, we're going to the Bulls and
just okay, this from this July 1 court case, whether that prevents him. Okay, literally in the 9 o'clock hours, what is free? Here's what happened of his imposing the sentence. Sean was going to be treated like the United States of America. Former prosecutor that, and let's execute on that in 2031. Befuddled, sick in the approach of the cases, including that argument date. We're not going to get a resolution there in the Georgia case. It has to do with Fonnie Lewis and admittedly this sort of inappropriate relationship.
Right, whether or not she can stay on the case because she was sleeping with her assistant prosecutor,
right.
but it has nothing to do with the case
Right.
and didn't bias them in any way. And oh yeah, so what? At the end of the day, there's still a RICO charge against Trump and lots of other people. What about those other folks, man? Are those cases going to go forward? I mean, isn't he a co-defendant with all, or was he split off?
He is right. He is a co-defendant. You could again. That's the big issue, right? Presumably, they're not subject to the immunities that the Supreme Court identified.
They're going to freeze their
We're going to
cases.
freeze that, right? And they're not going to be the president of the United States of America. Maybe if your theory about Matt Gaetz and Gableman is true, maybe they could be candidates for positions in this administration. But I'll take my tongue out of my cheek and say quite seriously, I'm shocked by that as well. And let's go to the two others. Tanya Chutkan. Okay, she's got a motion from Jack Smith.
Yeah, this is the January 6th
This is the January 6th.
overturning the election.
This is the really big one, right?
Yeah,
right.
The one that
And-
really,
right?
really matters.
And she has said, I'm going to treat you like everybody else. I don't know what Jack Smith is doing. I don't know why he is filing motions both there and in the Mar-a-Lago documents case with the 11th Circuit, saying to all those tribunals, hold on, suspend, terminate what you've got right now. And those motions are being granted. Tanya Chutkan, after saying for years, I'm going to treat you like every other defendant, granted that motion of my government, of the Department of Justice that represents us. And she said, okay, I'm taking off all the deadlines. Why, Tanya?
Well, the DOJ is pulling back, and certainly, Trump's team. Well, what's the judge going to say? Okay, both these folks want to pull back and freeze or do whatever, delay. What am I going to do? She's granted the motion.
Right, and she did just that. And I would say, Tanya, that's wrong. You don't have to grant a motion of the Department of Justice. Issue your opinion on the homework given to you by the Supreme Court. Supreme Court told you to figure out whether or not this crazy thing about immunities should apply to your case. You have to be working on it. You've got half the briefs already submitted. Get the briefs from the defense and spend the next 45 days finishing that up and issue that decision. You don't have to grant that motion. Admittedly, is the case ever going to be tried? No, it's not. Impossible to envision any scenario. Is it a good thing under the rule of law to get that opinion out there, to bring this cycle of history to an end? I would argue absolutely. And go to the 11th Circuit also, which has likewise been told, suspend everything. Is it significant? Maybe not quite as Tanya Chutkan's order.
That's the Florida documents case that they're under appeal because the judge
Eileen
dismissed
Cannon
it,
said a prosecutor can't do this. A crazy notion. Would it be
because he's a special prosecutor? She dismissed the special prosecutor.
Exactly, because Clarence Thomas said somebody should look at this, and she said, "Okay, I will. I'll dismiss the case." Is it helpful to the rule of law in America, even though that case will never go to trial, for us to hear from another appellate court that says, you know what, special counsel has legitimacy? There's nothing to what Eileen Cannon said. Slap her down again, not physically. Slap her down again as they've done twice before, and tell her how wrong she is. We would be valued, high value in hearing from the 11th Circuit. None of that will happen. I don't know what's going on, Dom. Why it is we're pulling back from all of this at a time when we can bring them to an end.
Rich white men play in the justice system, man. I mean, are you really surprised?
I am.
I mean, I don't know, man.
Right?
I mean, it seems to me so stereotypical. Delay, hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, he's just pilfered all this money, or it was donated to him from his cult followers.
Right.
To work the system. And now that he got elected, if he wasn't elected, this wouldn't be happening.
It would not be happening. None of this would be happening. All those cases would still be going ahead. Now we've got a complete reversal of fortune. And think about that. We've got a situation where judicial proceedings are, until just this past week or weeks or so, we're moving ahead apace, right? And now what happened? In a political arena, there was a decision to nominate and campaign under and now elect this person who happens, yes, indeed, to have the most important position on the face of the planet. And that is now going to direct what our criminal justice system does in states and the federal courts as well. If that doesn't strike you as problematic in America, and again, a sign of where we are in America, It should. And again, maybe not surprised, but shocked, as they often say.
Folks, that is James Santel, former U.S. attorney. Still feeling like
I'll jump off my soapbox.
I know, man. Jim, you work for the DOJ.
I did. 30 years. 30 years. That's how old I am.
Are you proud of this organization, man?
I'm extremely proud of this organization. Is it perfect? Absolutely not.
Has there been a less perfect situation than what we're seeing right now?
I can't remember when it was. I worked for 9 attorneys general, Dom. 7 of them Republicans and 2 of them Democrats. Not politicized, not the kind of thing we've seen in recent years. Extraordinarily proud of the agencies, the investigators, the prosecutors, people in the U.S. Attorney's Office. I have so much respect for them around the country. And now what's happening? And that's why my bias, obviously, is in favor of the integrity of the system. That's why I'm so outraged with what's happened here and the fact we're not going to get conclusions here. And it's not going to happen. I am shocked.
Not getting conclusions means he got away with it, Jim.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That's not okay, dude.
It's not.
Folks, this is the Dom Salvia Show, 855-752-4842. Coming back with more of your calls and your texts as well. Stick around.
When the truth is found to be lies, and all the joy within you dies. Don't you want somebody to love? Don't you need somebody to love? Wouldn't you love somebody to love? You better find.
Hey, thank you for listening to the Dom Salvia Show, 855-752-4842, 855-75-CIVIC. It's a text line. It's a phone line. And we got some texters jumping in here. James Santel at the desk with me, Jess PS on the board. A couple of thoughts here from the 740 WMDX. I've never enjoyed so much A bunch of words that made me so angry. Thank you to the guests. Thank you, Jim. You're firing them up out there.
Right. That's what I do. I make people angry, apparently, in 2024,
No.
2025.
Gary from WAUK. Jim's right. These judges should have set a precedent. Thank you for your comments, Gary. I don't know if it's a precedent. It's just like normal business, right? I mean,
right.
you just go and you're guilty, you get sentenced. I mean, why would the future something impact what is going on right now?
Absolutely. And again, if we know from history, recent and past, when you rely upon things that might happen in the future, it's not going to go well, right? It's just, I always bring this along when I'm ever with you. This is On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. Do not obey in advance is rule of law number one, right?
Yup.
When a citizen who adapts in this way is teaching power what it can do. That's what you're doing by saying, nope, we're not going to issue any decisions. We're shutting all this down now in anticipation of something that will likely happen. Let's be realistic about it.
Yeah.
The trials will not happen. But get those rule of law decisions. When you do this and do it now, you're also instructing the future leaders, I will say with a small L, and they may have other descriptive aspects to them in the future. You're also telling them what they can do when they get into power. That's very dangerous. That's tyranny, according to Tim Snyder.
And since we're not there yet, I mean, we're not suggesting. And we heard some, I don't know if the report in there's been some ambulances at Mar-a-Lago. Do we know anything more about that?
No.
Okay.
I don't know anything more about that.
But notwithstanding, there's some reporting out there, some thoughts about their Secret Service might be involved, but we'll get to that later. My point on that, Jim, is the dude could have a medical condition between now and then. I mean, he could. There could be some circumstance where he doesn't take the office.
Right.
Well, what are you doing then?
Right.
Do you have to wind it all back up again then? I mean,
Right.
what are these people doing?
Right, exactly. And talk about, again, look, if something like that should happen, nobody hopes that Donald Trump or anyone else in the next administration suffers that kind of challenge, medical or otherwise. It's the reason why we have rules when it comes to civil litigation and criminal litigation, and we proceed apace. And yes, indeed, if I've had this happen just a handful of times in 30 years, we were investigating. I won't tell you all about the case. We're investigating a potential defendant. He died during the course of the investigation, right? And what you do is, and we knew that he was ill for a long period of time, but we didn't bring the case to conclusion until after we knew that had happened.
Right.
So,
Oh, this guy's going to die, so we're not going to pursue it anyway. No, we're going to pursue it.
Right.
Hyman Roth from The Godfather 2. He's been dying from the same heart attack for 30 years.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Some people continue on. You don't let those things influence a straightforward judicial process, right?
Especially from people. Again, Tanya Chutkan. Again, I admire her tremendously. I am so surprised. Again, this is a woman who has consistently said, "I'm unlike Juan Merchan. I'm not delaying things. Get your motions in here. Get your briefs in here, gentlemen." It's has been some females, but mostly men representing Donald Trump. And now she says, "Okay, 60 days out." I'll grant this motion. These are people who have been committed to the process, and again, if
they say they were, Jim. I mean, this is my thing. I mean, and I'd love to give the deference as you do as well, but I got to look at the actions here, man. And I'm not a former U.S. attorney. I'm not even an attorney. I'm just a guy in the radio looking at a situation where it looks like these guys are getting a pass. You got enough money, you got enough influence. You don't have to go through the process. And even though the guy could literally get sentenced for the crime that he was convicted of unanimously by a jury of his peers, he could get the sentence and do 5 days, 10 days, 30 days, whatever the case is. Hell, even house arrest. Put something on the guy, man.
Conclude this case and put a bow on it and move it on. This notion, once again, that any of these matters would be frozen, I don't know what that means
legal term,
at all, right?
Jim, real quick before we move on to other matters at the bottom of the hour here. I know you're proud of your work that you've done, man, and I absolutely appreciate that and respect you for all that you've done. What are your former colleagues thinking about these issues? And Matt Gaetz is now off the board, thankfully. But this adjudication of the Trump cases.
I have not spoken directly to sitting assistant U.S. attorneys out there or sitting United States attorneys. I suspect they would probably maybe not have my animated outrage about this, but they're also people, again, all sides of the political aisle. There are Republicans and Democrats as assistant U.S. attorneys, as assistant district attorneys around this country. It doesn't influence their decisions about how you charge cases. They're also people of institution. Frankly, defense counsel are people of institutions who want some resolution. Yes, indeed, is a legitimate strategy to delay, and it benefits defense counsel. But there's a good reason for the justice system generally to have conclusions to it. That's the reason why we move forward. That's why we have speedy trial acts and limits on the amount of pages you can write. And when you've got to appear, all these kinds of things, I have to believe, and from some conversations I've had with other lawyers not inside the Department of Justice, they also look at this and say, what is going on here? And again, to ask the question that I truly want someone to explain to me what the legal principle is that prompts this all to be suspended right now. My sense is there's also a huge amount of, at a minimum, head scratching going on about the ways in which these are ending with an incredible whimper. A whimper is the way that these cases are ending. And again, they'll never go into trial, but they should have ended with some conclusion on some of these meritorious issues. That's what we lack. That's what American history will now lack forever.
Folks, that is James Santel, former U.S. attorney and host of Amicus, a law review right here on the Civic Media Radio Network on Saturdays, 9 to 11 a.m. And we get to have a little fun together once a week. Jim, I appreciate you joining me today. We're going to get into the Bibles, this the separation of church and state, and should religion be taught in school? Should it be taught as a matter of history? How should it be taught? Should all religions be taught? I want to get your sense on that as well. And then I got one other question. Well, before we move on from the Trump stuff, I'm going to save it for the other side. 855-752-4842. Join us.
There's a muffled voice of reason, but we can't make out the words.
And welcome back to the Dom Salvia Show, 855-752-4842. Former U.S. Attorney James Santel joining me at the table today. We got some texters and some callers. Be patient. We will get to you. Jim from the Facebook says, love Jim always on the air or in his summertime classroom. A lot of love for James Santel here. Before we move on to the Oklahoma Bible study, to wrap up this thought on the Department of Justice and these cases against Donald Trump, in your experience, Jim, U.S. Attorney for 30 years,
Right.
Have you ever been involved or had a situation where you felt pressured politically, where you felt that your safety was in jeopardy because of any cases that you were working on?
The answer to the first part of that is absolutely not. And I want to animate that and populate that answer a little bit more. And the second part of it is, of course, as a United States attorney, and this is the easy thing to answer, and people will say, well, gee, that's very serious. You are plainly the person whose name is on the prosecution, right? And this is James Santel announced today the indictment of so-and-so. And so you're the face of the Department of Justice in the particular district. Are there times when you do get letters, for example, from a defendant who is one day sitting in federal prison, who writes a letter to the U.S. attorney in eastern Wisconsin or in southern Florida or in western Michigan? That is a threat. Sure, there are. Those things happen. And I don't want to say they come with the territory, but they are investigated and they are pursued. And the answer is, did I personally ever feel threatened? Even in that setting, that sort of thing, even a criminal defendants. And I did violent crime cases. I did white-collar stuff. I did violent crime cases, drug cases, gun cases. The answer is they plainly didn't like me, the fellow who was sitting
Right.
at the... And I get that completely. Yeah. I'm arguing for their criminal conviction and arguably for the single most important thing that a government can do, which is deny you your liberty. I get the reason why I am the face as an assistant U.S. attorney and a U.S. attorney as someone they would not like. I never actually felt physically threatened. I never felt that as if I was compromised in some way in that. To your first portion, that is pressure to do something, and there is an absolute no, my friend. Again, worked for 7 different attorneys general, including, I again admire her so very much, Janet Reno, Eric Holder were the ones with whom I probably had the most connection. I was an interim U.S. attorney under John Ashcroft and also worked with Alberto Gonzalez when I was overseas in Iraq, all those names from the past. Not once did anyone look at me and say, well, you know, Jim, the Democratic platform says the Republican position on this is it just doesn't happen. And you can set the tone, as I'd like to think I did and former U.S. attorneys and subsequent U.S. attorneys can do. You say inside the office that we will look at cases based upon the merits. We'll determine whether or not a grand jury would indict, a jury would convict. Based upon what the law is, we'll pull out our criminal code and figure out how we should charge these cases. We'll call the agents in the FBI, DEA, ATF, and quiz them on the cases. You simply never ask, are we being loyal to the president here, loyal to what Eric Holder or John Ashcroft would want us to do? It doesn't come up or shouldn't come up. In my experience, it was not a part of anywhere in the process, and I'm very proud of that fact. That's the reason why this great concern. Again, the 8 days of Matt Gaetz are gone. But what is next? And if indeed the Department of Justice becomes the focus of retribution and is the animator.
To bring the CIA, the FBI, all these agencies to heal, I believe was the term that Gaetz said.
Exactly. If that is what we have coming in the 60 days from now, that is a huge departure from what my experience was for 3 decades. And it is a reason that, again, will, in the wake of my great, profound pride for every single aspect of the Department of Justice. Again, perfect? Absolutely not. Lots of things we have to correct on a regular basis, but proud of the institution, the integrity it brings. That could very well change. And again, even though Gaetz is no longer there, the signal, as you said at the start of the first hour this afternoon, maybe it's this attempt to see what we can do and send the message, this is my plan. And that will be a dramatic change, not just in Maine Justice, but around the country. For a U.S. Attorney's Office, once again, in the District of Arizona, in Montana, in Northern Illinois, which is Chicago, and in the Southern District of New York, in Eastern Wisconsin and Western Wisconsin. You populate these places, Boy, you'd like to think that we don't have attorneys who would kneel to a president and take a confirmation from the Senate, a nomination. Maybe they're out there around the country. You need 93 of them to be U.S. attorneys. I hope that doesn't change. I hope the integrity is there. You also have a president who's promised to get rid of the civil service. That's all the assistant U.S. attorneys and make them at-will employees. And if they don't bow, if they don't kneel, if they don't do what the president says, much less the attorney general, I can fire you. Those are the prospects. Those are things that are on the table right now. He's said that during the course of the campaign, and he is not backing off of those things. That's what scares me.
Have you ever considered, or do you have former associates at the DOJ who would leave the position because of an incoming Republican or Democrat,
Sure.
whatever the case may be? Has
Sure.
that has that been a thing ever?
Yeah, I think sometimes I remember. Again, people will privately, again, outside of those official categories, say, "Oh my goodness, now you fill in the blank. This attorney general is going to come in. Now we're going to be doing all these kinds of cases when we should be doing those." People have
Sure.
those kinds of observations. That's not politics inside the office, but you see that there have been U.S. attorneys who have said, "You know what? I know I'm not going to survive a new administration. I left at the end of the Obama administration." That is regular. And so even when this happens, no listeners think that Donald Trump is now firing all the U.S. attorneys. They're all going to go. That's a part of the process here. We'll see how he does that, but that will happen early on in 2025. There are U.S. attorneys who say, "You know what? I do not want to spend one day under the term of," and you fill in your president's name. And that has happened. And again, you might think, well, gee, that sounds awfully political, Jim. And maybe it is for that person in that political position who simply says, "I want to be the kind of U.S. attorney who will be serving a president that I respect, or serving an attorney general I respect. And I have just decided that I would prefer to wake up in the morning and look in the mirror as a private citizen as opposed to continuing under an administration." I wonder right now if there are people out there, 10, 15, 20, 30 year tenure, who say, "Gosh, is this a president? Is this an attorney general under whom I want to continue if indeed the Department of Justice becomes the Department of Retribution?"
855-752-4842. James Santel, my co-host today here at the table. Let's move along. The Oklahoman reporting that Ryan Walters, Oklahoma's state superintendent, he's buying a bunch of Bibles. He put out a video the other day that he made everyone play in their schools, and if they didn't, they're going to be in trouble, where he says he wants to start teaching the Bible in schools. In the news release, Walter said the Bibles would be used in advanced placement government classrooms across the state. He said the move represented the first in the nation Bible purchase explicitly for use in schools as an academic and literary resource, and described the purchase as a first step toward providing Bibles for every classroom in the state. Now, my understanding is some of those Bibles, based on the specs that they made, were only really going to be fulfilled by the Donald Trump Bibles. But I think
They
that's
cost
been
$60, I think, right?
That's been redone, my understanding. But either way, the Bible in the classroom, Jim, separation of church and state, is that a thing, or was I taught wrong?
You were not taught wrong, Dom, and the reality is that none of us was taught improperly here. Let's go back to 1963. This has been settled, right? 1963. I know you know this. Jess knows this. Is Abington School District versus Shemp. And in that case, the United States Supreme Court said that public schools cannot support Bible readings in class. Those are recitations, even the Lord's Prayer, those kinds of things. They constitute a government endorsement of a religion. That violates what? The Establishment Clause. Government cannot establish or do something that promotes a particular religion. That's what James Madison told us, right, in the First Amendment to the Constitution. We've lived under that, again, for at least now 40 years, frankly, 250 years or so of our history. This is settled law, and this is a superintendent saying, "I don't care what the law of the land is." Again, what can you do? Here are a couple of variations on it. people often say, well, there can be no Bible reading. I cannot read my religious text in school. The answer is no. That's not what the Supreme Court said. The Supreme Court said you can't stand up in front of your AP government class and say, okay, open your book to Leviticus and let's read from Leviticus today. You can't have that organizational piece. In a study hall, can an independent student open the Guru Granth Sahib if you happen to be sick, S-I-K-H? Can you open the Bible and read it if you are a Christian? Absolutely you can do
Your
that.
own Bible as
Your
a
own
student,
Bible,
knock yourself
exactly.
out.
You
Yes.
can't have government, however, enforcing that upon other people. What you can do, the other piece that you can do is you can have, again, that's why the AP government thing is very interesting. Can you do a course on world religions? Sure you can, as long as you're not proselytizing and you are talking about world religions, right? There are many, many, many of them out there. We talk about Christianity and Judaism and Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism. Those are kind of the top 5 that are out there. And there are 20 and 30 and 40 others that are recognized out there. You can put together an academic course that talks about where they come from historically, how they're interrelated. We know, for example, that the Abrahamic faiths, right? Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, all of those, where those come from and how those, you can do that kind of a thing without saying, and this is what Muhammad said, this is what Jesus said, and we are to follow that because we're reading this together and we're all going to embrace exactly what, that's the difference. And that's why the superintendent is so very, very wrong. That's the reason why we'll see what happens in Oklahoma. Somebody's got to stop that from happening. It's in violation of the Supreme Court, the law of the land, right?
Well,
right?
you know, my opinion, Jim, you could teach all those things in mythology class in your literature. Louisiana putting up the 10 Commandments, same
Yes,
kind of thing.
right.
Now, obviously, there's pushback. There's lawsuits. I mean, this is I can't imagine. But again, this is a brave new world. I
Right.
can't imagine someone sentenced for fraud back in the early summer wouldn't, or convicted of fraud wouldn't be sentenced. But things happen. Jim, this is a constant push. They're continuing to push for this. What about the 10 Commandments
Right.
in the classroom? Same
Right.
thing?
Exactly. It's the same thing because, again, if you are putting this up there, there have been some major cases even about, the 10 Commandments. We've seen these appearing in official government offices or even outside the city hall, that sort of thing, and saying, here they are. Here are the rules that we all apply, we all follow, and we apply in our lives. That also is in violation of what? The Establishment Clause. Because once again, this government entity, public schools, public entities are saying we are embracing this Christian codification and can't do it. You're not supposed to do it. But to your point, once again, what we're doing here is revisiting things from, again, 40 years and see if we can take another swipe at it and see if we can get
Worked
that
out
back
so
to the
well
Supreme
last
Court
time.
and maybe somebody will tell us, no, Supreme Court was wrong back in
Yes.
1963. We've all been living under the wrong interpretation here. Gosh, we've heard that before, haven't we?
We sure have.
2022 Dobbs. Turns out we don't have a privacy right to abortion under the Constitution. We thought that was settled. Apparently not.
All hail Baphomet. Nolan from Madison, you are up. Welcome, Nolan. What do you got for us?
Howdy.
Hey there.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Oklahoma is kind of 48th.
40. Yes. Go ahead, Nolan. You still there? All right, we lost Nolan. Good point. Thank you for bringing it up. During a great interview on CNN, the state superintendent of Oklahoma, Ryan Walters, was asked, yes, sir, but you're spending all this money on Bibles. I think he wants $6 million to go buy these Bibles. Wouldn't that be better spent on other issues in your classroom since you're ranked 48th in the nation?
Maybe some chemistry books, some chemistry texts, some physics, or frankly, some literature, right? Let's bring in some world literature, right, and talk about that. All kinds of things that maybe, just maybe, the superintendent should be focused on. Again, I'm not going to say traditional education, but there is such a thing, and he needs to be focused on just that.
855-752-4842. One final segment with our friend James Santel.
Broken dreams.
Thank you for listening to the Dom Salvia Show. Last segment of the day. If you got something to say, hit us up on the lines right now. 855-752-4842. Callers, texters, we see you. Be patient. We will get to you. James Santel talking about religion in schools. And not religious schools. I went to a private Catholic religious school. You expect to get taught religion in those classes.
And that's okay.
And not just
right?
the belief,
Right.
but I mean, not just the history, but also the
Right.
belief part
Absolutely.
of it. And I don't object to a historical. I mean, obviously, religion has been very influential in civilization.
6,000 years,
And
right?
I would say
Right.
negatively, you know,
Right.
if I'm teaching that class, I'm saying, look at all the justification we've done to murder each other.
Let's talk about the Crusades for a while, right?
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And go on and all the things that were before and all the things that are yet to come.
Yeah.
I always say it, man. Today's religion is tomorrow's mythology. So am I going to be able to go and pray to Odin and bring my raven to class as part of my religious freedom? You know, I mean, there is, as the non-believer, and everyone's a non-believer to some degree. You know what I'm saying? Because you might believe in your religion, but you don't believe in all the other ones.
Yes,
So
yes,
everyone's an atheist to some degree. I just take mine one God further. But this case, September 17th, 1980, the Stone versus Graham, U.S. Supreme Court ruled 5-4.
5-4. Split
that
court.
a Kentucky statute requiring school officials to put a copy of the Ten Commandments on a wall in every public classroom violated the First Amendment's Establishment Clause. 5-4, Jim.
That's a little close, isn't
what?
it?
So
Yes,
I mean, when
yeah.
it was 5-4 the other way, then
Right.
how does that? How's that even possible? How could a Supreme Court justice, looking at the Constitution, say,
Right.
"Oh yeah, that makes total sense"?
They're going back 15, 18 years and saying, no, there's an entire line of establishment cases, and these are pretty clear, right? We're talking about public institutions, publicly funded. Again, some of the other areas I recognize, there may be some grays out there. That isn't when you're putting up, again, the rules of Christianity from Moses and teaching everybody in the 5th grade class and when you're a junior in high school. This is what we all need to follow. That's got to be in violation of the Supreme Court. Can you do it at a private institution? Sure you can. Why? Because it is private, right? That's not a problem.
Right.
It doesn't run afoul of the Constitution. It's the reason why you can also have higher institutions of learning that also are religious in nature. That is entirely permissible. Public funding, public support, that's when the difference is made. This issue about a divided Supreme Court. In recent times, we can chat some other time about it. We've had a drift, again, in recent cases. There are 3 or 4 of them, in which John Roberts has been at the lead saying, more and more, the standard is not so much are you establishing religion, is discriminating against it. And if you don't give public funds, for example, for various support mechanisms, for scholarships to the private schools, to the religious schools, you are discriminating against them, and you can't do that. And we'll see if that's opening the door to, again, these Bible cases
that's
coming
what I'm
back to the
thinking,
Supreme Court.
They're going to throw everything at the wall and try to get a Dobbs again and bring down, because this has been the statement, the white Christian nationalists, this is what they want. They want this guy, Ryan Walters. I thought he was basically wanting the Department of Education job. Well, Linda McMahon got
Oh,
that.
he wanted it.
He wanted that. He's trying. Speaking of the Supreme Court, we got a caller in. Keith from Broadhead. You are next. Welcome to the show, man. We got Jim here. What do you got for us?
Hey, gentlemen. There's a line in the movie, The Da Vinci Code, which is one of the best that touches on what you're saying there. As long as has been one true God, there's been killing in His name. You know, it's a little ironic that one of the 10 Commandments is "Thou shalt not kill," and religion has killed more people in the world, in the history of the world, than any other single force on the planet.
Yes.
I actually wanted to touch on the Supreme Court a little bit, because
Yeah.
I'm curious, James, if you have an idea of how we can still go about getting some sort of judicial ethics through
Right.
for the Supreme Court. Is that something that is possibly going to happen ever?
The answer is there are people out there like you, Keith, and people in Congress who are making a mighty effort to do just that. You've got the introduction of legislation, at least in this Congress, 118th Congress, both the House and the Senate. There's a fellow named Sheldon Whitehouse. There's a fellow named Dick Durbin, who's the head of the Judiciary Committee coming from Illinois. They've got legislation. Basically, it's premised upon the notion that, well, the Supreme Court hasn't really done it. They put together some standards out there, but there's no enforcement mechanisms. And White House and others have said, if you don't do it, we will. And they have responded to everything, Keith, that I suspect you have digested with respect to Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas, all the issues about financial concerns, employment, friends having cases before you, all those kinds of things. It's there. And the question is, will the incoming Senate, you've got to be, again, you got to pass it by a 60 vote. Will they have the votes to do it? No. In the coming Senate, they won't. That's not to say you don't reintroduce it. That's not to say you don't continue to advocate for that, as long as John Roberts and the other members of the Supreme Court are not going to do it themselves. And doing it, what does that mean? Imposing upon themselves the same standard, Keith, that every other federal judge in America, district court judges, appellate court judges, have to follow. The Supreme Court does not. Supreme Court, Keith, to your very good point, needs to do that themselves and say we will be monitored. Interestingly, one of the justices, I think it was Elena Kagan, said, let's establish an additional group of judges who are district court judges, appellate court judges. They'll be kind of the OLR, if you will. They'll
Right.
be the ones who will tell us what we got to do and what we can't do. Fascinating concept, right? But it's some enforcement mechanism, and you do have justices. What that means is who are committed to doing this. Right now, Keith, you can do it if we get our legislature, regardless of the partisan perspective on it, to do just that. They've got to do it.
James Santel, former U.S. Attorney, host of Amicus, a law review that broadcasts here on the Civic Media Radio Network Saturdays from 9 to 11 a.m. Jim, always a pleasure, man. I'll be tuning in once again.
What a delight to be with you once again, my
Absolutely.
friend.
Thank you, Jess P.S. on the board. Thank you to our fair audience. Have a wonderful evening. Stick around. Nightlight with Pete Schwaba is coming up next.